fellow Iowan and Iowa Army National Guard member. Mr. Lucas and I served together in the Iowa Army National Guard.
Okay.
He succeeded Pete Hegseth as executive
I know
director,
this one pops off.
official dedicated to sexual.
Thank you.
I am focused on your fitness to serve, including your character and temperament and your overall qualifications to do the job. And I do appreciate the comments of Ranking Member Reed with his concerns regarding your nomination, because I share those concerns. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of all nominees to come before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
Senator, I was falsely accused in October of 2017. It was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
I don't think completely cleared is accurate, but the fact is that your own lawyer said that you entered into an NDA and paid a person who accused you of raping her a sum of money to make sure that she did not file a complaint. Moving on. As Secretary, you will be in charge of maintaining good order and discipline by enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ. In addition to the sexual assault allegations, and by the way, the answer to my second question should have been yes. I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News.
Who amongst us,
Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports peddled by NBC
Do you
News
know that
run directly
drinking on the job
contradictory to the dozens of men and women at
Not
Fox News
contemplated
Channel
on it.
who I worked
I'm
with
not
News
hearing the
Channel.
answer to my question.
and said
In your
they've
opening
never seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels. That includes you, of course. And frankly, as Secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job?
Holy
Which
shit,
is-
this woman is 77 years old. God damn. You think you'd have more skin sun damage over there in Hawaii or something? Jesus. That's pretty good. Yeah, no, I would have guessed like 60. Asian don't Asian. You can't do that with everyone, okay? Somewhere out there, there's an ethnic group more susceptible than white people, okay?
Is a 24/7 position.
I've made this commitment on behalf of
Will
the
you
men and women I'm
resign as
serving.
Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made
you
this commitment
drink
on
on the
behalf
job?
of the men and women I'm serving
I'm not
because it's
hearing-
the most important deployment.
She's
I'm
only
not
a
hearing the
little
answer to my
younger than
question, So
Biden.
I'm going to move on. While you have made that commitment, you will not commit to resigning if you drink on the job. As Secretary of Defense, you will swear an oath to the Constitution and not an oath to any man, woman, or president, correct?
Senator, on multiple occasions, including as a young second lieutenant, I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown DC, an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry out
holding a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
Secretary
by
Esper?
rioters trying to jump over the fence, set
Again,
the church on fire, and
You
destroy
know
a
what,
statue.
that sounds to me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on. President-elect has attacked
I've always liked her.
our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening to make Canada the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force, or would you comply with an order to take over the Panama Canal?
Senator, I will emphasize that
Senator.
President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful
We're
commander-in-chief
not
of
talking
this
about the
country.
election. My question is,
So
would
yeah,
you-
so the answer is yes then. Yeah. He won by 1% of the popular vote. He won by 1 point. That means yes, we can nuke Greenland or whatever. We have the mandate of 1/4 the population of the United States voting in favor of him.
you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what order.
He's a strategic mastermind. No one knows what he's going to do next.
Contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal. Current DoD policy allows service members and eligible dependents to be reimbursed for travel associated with non-covered reproductive health care, including abortions. Will you maintain this common sense policy?
Senator, I've always been personally pro-life. I know President Trump has as well, and we will review all policies, but our standard is whatever the president wants on this particular issue. With my advice, I will take a look at.
If the president tells you that this common sense policy will not be maintained, you will not enable our service members to seek reproductive care. So
I don't believe the federal government
I'm not hearing answers to my questions, Mr. Chairman. I just want to note that the other area that of serious concern to me is President Trump saying that he wants to use the military to help.
It's so cool that under Hegseth's DOD, if there's a female in the military that you don't like and don't want to work with her anymore, you could just like a soldier could just rape her, and then since she couldn't get an abortion because the military wouldn't allow her time to do so, she would have to withdraw from the service.
Help with mass deportations, which will cost billions of dollars. And what that will do to readiness is very, very concerning. Mr. Hegseth, I have noticed a disturbing pattern. You previously have made a series of inflammatory statements about women in combat, LGBTQ service members, Muslim Americans, and Democrats. Since your nominations, however, you have walked those back on TV in interviews and most recently in your opening statements. You are no longer on Fox and Friends, Mr. Hegseth. If confirmed, your words, actions, and decisions will have real impacts on national security and our service members' lives. There are close to 3 million personnel in the Department of Defense, $900 billion budget. I hardly think you are prepared to do the job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator,
Thank you. That wasn't a question, Mr. Hegseth. Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hegseth. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you and your family for your service and sacrifice.
thank you, Senator.
Now for the most important question you will receive all day. In 1935, before the Congress, the father of the United States Air Force, General Billy Mitchell, was
don't think it's
testifying
gonna be that
about a
important.
certain place in the world. He said, quote, "I believe that in the future, whoever holds this place will control the world. This location is the most strategic place in the world." What place was Billy Mitchell talking about? And let me give you a hint, it wasn't Greenland.
I believe he was talking about the great state of Alaska.
He was talking about the great state of Alaska. Great answer. If confirmed, will you commit to come with me to the great state of Alaska and meet our warriors who are on the front lines every day?
Senator, I have, and as I mentioned to you in the past, I
He's
did
from
a
Alaska.
brief training exercise up at Fort Wainwright at a
I don't care about
previous
this shit.
part of my military life. I look forward to returning.
Great. And I will say.
The
we are on
Tim
front
Kaine
line.
one.
By a woman who would like.
Okay, this is the only other section of his Senate confirmation hearing that I was really interested in looking at. Fuck you, Elizabeth Warren. Apparently, Tim Kaine cooked him. I saw the clip. Well, I saw the clip. I didn't watch the clip, so I'm curious.
Later become your third wife, correct?
Hold, okay,
Our
hold your
military will follow that
horses.
order, Senator. Gladly, because they
I
want to
didn't
focus
think
on lethality and
not
warfighting and
rewinding
get
10
all the
seconds
woke,
would be an issue
political
for the
prerogative,
context,
politically
but-
correct social justice, political stuff out of the military.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Kaine.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to talk. I want to return to
Apparently.
the incident that you referenced a minute ago that occurred in Monterey, California in October 2017. At that time, you were still married to your second wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged, fully
you-
investigated and completely cleared.
So you think you were completely cleared because you committed no crime. That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman that was not your wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you were completely cleared? How is
Senator,
that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And
That's
she was,
great,
and,
man.
and you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It
no,
was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I'm so grateful for the marriage I have to this amazing woman behind me.
You've admitted that you had sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against me.
You
Fully investigated, and I was completely cleared.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It's a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So you
Talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And it
you
was
cheat, but
fully
you acknowledge
investigated.
that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath, like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being Secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States.
Would be nice if any of this mattered. Don't worry, it does. Not to his nomination, but to the broader implications of this government, this coming administration, and how it's going to go down. If this was like a competent administration, then we would see a selection of like hand-picked, intelligent, competent bureaucrats and loyalists who could non-controversially enter government and then enact their agenda. He just picked out like sycophants and the loudest loyalists that he could find and then threw them in the, like, again, like the Attorney General, how am I blanking on his name as I always do, Beavis and Butthead ass, Matt Gaetz, Rep Gaetz. Like, it's embarrassing. And stuff like this is part of that, you know? It's not going to stop him from being, confirmed, but it is definitely indicative of the underlying problem they're going to keep running into over and over.
Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you in open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned
I know
Veterans
which
for
ones,
America
but
and
those
executive
two,
director
were
of
you
Vets for
fired?
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not anonymous.
The letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
they're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who
seen
worked
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to
Freedom,
them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News attributing to me
one of your colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you deny these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous.
Notice how he's never saying, yeah, if that was true, that'd be really bad. Like, for none of the, he's done this like a dozen times now, you know?
And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing. We have seen multiple names of colleagues consistently throughout your career that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I think
attitudes,
he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements.
He's way
Wait,
over his
I
time.
now yield.
Hold him back.
Thank
He's
you very
dead,
much.
man.
I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a family court order concerning the appointment of parenting time between Mr. Hegseth and Mrs. Samantha Hegseth. It states that
Fuck
there
you.
were no claims.
One more.
Is Senator John Tower was
Not
nominated
read.
for Secretary of Defense.
The next one.
It was discovered by his colleagues
And then
that
we
his
do a different
behavior
thing.
was not commensurate with the responsibilities despite his service, and he was voted down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, you are recognized.
Go to
Thank you, Mr.
Warren.
Chairman.
I
And
don't
also,
like
Secretary
her.
Matters had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition, and any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk, and I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led as large as a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong. And that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget.
She said billion. I think she meant million there. $18 million, not billion. 18 billion would be a very impressive amount of money to manage.
$825 billion. $16 million is
16 million, yeah.
51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen if whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization? Yes or no? I don't want a long answer. Yes or no? Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or
with the
no?
money
Did
that
you
we
lead
had.
an audit?
And the way
yes
my
or
leadership
no?
has
Did you
been
lead an audit?
stated
Yes or
has
no?
been completely
What are you afraid of? You
mischaracterized.
can't answer this question. Yes or no? Did you lead an audit? Do you not know this answer?
Senator,
Yes
every
or
part
no?
of my leadership
Yes
of these
or no?
organizations
Yes
has
or
been
no? Did you lead an audit?
misrepresented
I will
from
take
top
that
to
as a no.
bottom.
What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary to outfit our warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day. That, well, with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiation that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other
Okay.
than serving in the military. So my job has been to
So no, the
lead
answer is no.
men
Can
and
you
women in
name one of the
combat.
three main ones that the
You're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements. I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of Forces Agreement. I've been a part of teaching
So-
about Status of Forces Agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to mention
Afghanistan.
it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do acquisition and cross-servicing agreements, which essentially are security agreements. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact
No, you
amount of
couldn't,
nations in
because you've
that,
not
but I
even
know we have
bothered to
allies
do-
in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work
no.
on submarines with them.
Mr.
and data
Hegseth,
transfers
none
with
of those
them.
countries
We
are
have
in
allies
ASEAN.
across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen,
Oh
Mr.
no.
Hegseth, we ask our troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who'd saved my life. The same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war, and they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day.
Hoorah.
They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Thank you, Senator.
That was really goddamn, man. Didn't think we'd have I didn't think she'd go that hard. Jesus Christ. Warren, do we have to do what? Okay, after Warren, then I'm done because there's other things. My editors, they're telling me they'll kill me. I need the other segments. All these people are veterans, Vosh. They really care about this shit. Yeah. Well, again, I've spoken broadly about how a lot of Democrats are either, maliciously inept or incompetent. I'm usually speaking about the DNC broadly. I do think like that the outrage a lot of Democrats have about people like Hegseth being confirmed for DOD. For secretary, I think their outrage is legitimate there. I mean, clearly, a lot of them care. Look at that smirk after just being rude. This is smirking after you've been torn into is super common. That's like a very basic 101.
Duckworth, I would like to submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Brian.
After Rick Scott.
Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan Show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now,
it really is crazy how performative misogyny is like one of the main pulls rhetorically that these people have. You know what I mean? And like, there's like no consequences to it either, because it's not like women are watching Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro or whatever. That's like a 99% male audience, you know?
I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
So
standards are what it's always been about,
let's not have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much.
We know he's going to cause harm. We know he's getting approved. Why are you all acting smugly? If you were listening like to earlier in the segment, you would know why. I mean, you can be misery guts about it, but I'm going to be honest with you. Enjoy it up until like a few days after the 20th, because past that point, if you guys want to whine, I'm just going to ban you for it. What do you want? We're watching something fun. He's getting a hostile job interview. Like, well, it still sucks that global fascism is. We know. You go to birthday parties and pop all the balloons. The climate crisis is still happening. Thank you for reminding everyone.
You can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period. Or your words, straight up.
Also, it's not like it's meaningless. Fascist incompetence, like the seeds of its own downfall. Like the fact that Trump threw a bunch of like ass kissers and sycophants into cabinet positions rather than like carefully selecting an elite team of extremely evil but otherwise like competent and outwardly, you know, defensible people. These are. Don't you remember his first administration? He was constantly tripping over himself because of his appointments, because of the people that he briefly was siding with before like denouncing them. People, like, it was a revolving door in his cabinet. It's very important to keep track of this stuff. It's got to be the same damn thing here.
And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because for me, this issue has always been about standards.
And also 2024.
And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards, that they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult.
There is no quota. Again, as was said earlier, there is no quota for women in the military. That's not, they don't have a quota.
Let me make a suggestion about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about, because it's not one
right now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job
I understand that. I just need a yes or no here.
Come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the president is.
Oh, I'll bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for
We
your
gotta
hard
laugh.
work.
I have to assume they're laughing at him. He's literally applying for the role of big boy general. That was so bad. Yeah, he's gotten cooked pretty hard here, it seems. Yeah, I'm not listening to Tuberville. We gotta move along, man. He smirked like he misunderstood the laugh. Yeah, but midwits love to smirk when they're confronted, when they get owned, you know? That's like their favorite thing to do. It's like the tell, you know? You mean you don't want to listen to the dumbest guy in Congress? No.